Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by Mike, who is an intermediate photographer from the UK. Mike shot this with a 50mm lens at ISO 100 step down to f16 and exposed the file for 1/10 of a second and used a split neutral density filter on the sky. There are a couple of technical things there I want to talk about in just a minute. Backstory here is that Mike was at this castle shooting right at sunrise and was really trying to play the warm highlights off of the cool shadows as a major part of the design of the image. And Mike mentioned under questions and comments, this is not the typical shot of the castle. People are typically closer and the castle goes up into the sky. And so he just basically had a question about composition and whether this was working or not. Obviously that's subjective. I want to get into that in just a second. From a technical standpoint, I wanted to mention a couple of things here. Number one, I love the effect that Mike is getting from the split neutral density filter. If you're going to have this much sky without any clouds, having a gradient in the sky is really helping to do two things. It's helping to hold our eye in the image so that we don't go zooming out with a real bright sky up here. It's also just helping to balance, in this case, with the bottom part of this image, which is overall pretty dark relative to the middle of the image. But one thing I would say is that if you took this shot and you had any detail up here at all, even if it was very bright, I would be tempted to shoot this without the filter. Please hear me say I'm a huge fan of split neutral density filters with the digital cameras, and I use them all the time in my landscape work, but I only try and use filters when I absolutely need them, because anything that we put in front of the lens, no matter how high quality it is — I personally use Stingray filters, they're awesome, I love them — but no matter how great of a value or quality something is that you put in front of your lens, it has the potential to degrade the image. It also takes time out of your process. And just remembering that if you're shooting in RAW, your brightest pixels have the greatest bit depth. So you could take pixels up here that were near white and essentially make them any value and any color on the color wheel that you want. And you would have plenty of bit depth to do that without losing any image quality. It's when we try and take very dark pixels and make them bright that we run out of information and get noise. So this is something that I might pre-visualize doing to the file, but unless I absolutely needed to do it with a split neutral density filter, I wouldn't. And then the other part of this is f16. The main subject is very far away from the camera here, and f16 to me is probably overkill. And once we start to stop down that far on any lens, we're not going to have the same overall sharpness that we would at a middle aperture like f8. And whenever I'm just shooting out into space, I really want to know from a technical standpoint the sharpest apertures on my lens. And when I don't need depth of field and it's not a consideration, I never know when I want to print something maybe really big. I want to get as much sharpness out of the file as possible if it's that kind of shot, like a landscape shot. So I might go for a sharper aperture here. I would be looking at an aperture of around probably f8, but again, I would want to know the testing on the lens and maybe even do some of my own tests to figure that out. So two technical things. Hard to talk about technique that long looking at this image because it's so beautiful on so many different levels. Stunning quality of light. I love the split light effect and the color depth. I love the moment with the fog. It's not just fog, but it's the light hitting the fog and the amount of fog and where it is, which is really beautiful in terms of creating visual movement and visual depth in the image. And I like the fact that Mike took a different approach to this. He didn't take the normal vantage point. He went somewhere else and went his own way. Very, very powerful. I'm being master the obvious here, but that's very, very powerful. For all different kinds of reasons, but mostly for the benefit of our soul, to go your own way. Very powerful idea. When I start to think about this image and Mike's question about the composition, it's an image that I love. One of the things that's happening for me, as exciting as all this color is that the color is dividing the image up right down the middle. And in some respects, it's stopping this movement that's happening. You've got all this implied movement, but then this change just happens almost right on a line, and because of the symmetrical nature of the way the hill back here has been framed, and the base of the hill is sort of the same shape, and then that gets split in the middle, that starts to really slow me down in an image where I don't want to slow down. I'd like to be able to move all the way over here and then move back, and the color stops me from doing that a little bit. I think if I was going to leave this in color, I might try and play around with getting more warm let's say, into here, making it sort of look like the sun is somehow breaking through all the way over here, and then have some cool around it so that the warm could continue to move me towards the main idea. And I also would probably come in and make this gradient even more dramatic up here. The tough part about doing all those things in a file this color is making it believable. And you know, if we start to make this way too dark and the sun is coming up, it's in a straight landscape shot or a very descriptive landscape shot, maybe hard to do. And you know, I got kidded pretty bad when I started the Daily Critique. I mean, you know, I still do. There are lots of people that think that to even talk about design is corrupting and insane, and those are people that this is brutal. I'm just going to say it anyway. They give me a laugh, and I know immediately whenever I hear somebody doing that some serious fear on their part about feedback is being addressed. Because if you're afraid to talk about design, then you might as well just poke your eyes out. If you own a camera, you exist in a world where you're getting bombarded with visual information. So just go ahead and learn what it means and what the structure is and what the language is, then decide what you want to do about it. But to pretend that just by not watching the Daily Critique you're going to somehow exist outside of the influence of the idea of design makes you, I don't know how you operate your camera. In all seriousness, just felt like saying that today. Every once in a while I need to say that to keep my sanity doing this based on some of the emails that I get. I digress. I got kidded in the first part of doing the Daily Critique about always converting everything to black and white. But you know, I think a ton in black and white. Whenever color to me is challenged on any level, I start to see in black and white. Black and white is about 50 billion times easier than color. Color is so complicated from a design standpoint. And black and white is easy, which makes it more powerful. There are more qualities of light where it just works, and it's also more evocative on average because it's more abstract. And in a situation like this where we're shooting a subject that is very old, that also starts to make me think of black and white. The minute I looked at channels and I got rid of the color, that beautiful line of fog in the image here now starts to be this amazing sort of line that pulls me all the way through the image, and the design of the whole image starts to work together in a way for me that's a lot more powerful. I can also start to imagine this going much darker up here and creating something in the sky that's really sort of not there. Mike started it with pre-visualizing this and creating the gradient with a split neutral density filter, but you have this real strong sense of this dark sort of scooped out area that's creating the coda to the top of the hill. Well, we could rhyme an area of the image that's essentially almost featureless by making this top part much darker and doing that in a way where it arcs, and bring this in a very powerful way into a visual unity with the lower part of the image. So just the black and white conversion for me helps to tie the image together a lot better. I came in and did a levels adjustment to add a lot of low end to areas that were already dark and to really sort of accentuate the castle. I came in and pushed that even further with another levels adjustment. Really tried to, one of the things I'll try to do in a big shot like this is say, where are some other places in the image that I can create another room of visual information for the viewer? What about right out there? So I popped that out a little bit, and then I just came in and basically created a curves adjustment to make that sky more dramatic, and then just duplicated it a few times to just keep pushing it. This is where we started, and this is where we've ended up. And you know, this may be way too much for some people in terms of all the adjustments. I do try and go a little bit further than I normally would for the sake of the video. But you know, a lot of times when I get to this point, I'll save these layers, take all this stuff, combine it, put it on one layer, and then sit there and just play around with the opacity of all my changes on one layer. So love to hear your feedback about this. The reality is this is a stunner to start off with. It's such a beautiful quality of light and moment with the fog, and such a great location. Love the way Mike has created the gradient in the sky. Big thank you to Mike for sharing this image with us on the Mindful Eyes Daily Critique.